Well, we turn again now for a few minutes to William Gurnall, and we've seen in our most recent studies 6 reasons for the Christian to be ready to suffer difficulties and dangers, and Paul was speaking about that in the context of our reading there. But there are some, says Gurnall, who are unwilling to have this ready frame of mind. Well, who are they, we might ask? Well, Gurnall lists 5 who refuse to wear the gospel shoe. Who are the 5? Well, the first one, he says, is the ignorant Christian. Sad to say, there are those who have no true light as to who Christ is and what he has done for them. I think he's using the word Christian here in the broadest sense. Those who are within the pale of the Christian church, but not necessarily in the kingdom. There are those who have no light as to who Christ is or what he has done for them. How then can they have enough love to follow Christ through hardship, the Christ that they do not even know? And he gives an example of Nabal. You remember he was that fellow who David sent word to for help when he was fleeing from Paul. And Nabal replied, well, by his own way of it, a rational answer to David's servants. Shall I take my bread and my water that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men whom I know not whence they be? He decided the gift asked of him was too much for someone that he barely knew. Now, leaving Nabal to one side, and we dealt with him, I think probably last year in our studies in 1 Samuel, leaving Nabal to one side, or the rightness of what he did to one side, he decided the gift asked of him was too much for someone whom he barely knew. It is virtually impossible then for the ignorant person to part with the flesh of his own body if he is called to suffer at the command of Christ. Paul says, however, that his knowledge of Christ was the very reason that he wasn't ashamed to suffer. I know whom I have believed. 2 Timothy 1:12. We read it last Wednesday evening. The Samaritans, who were a mongrel sort of people in both descent and religion, claimed kinship with the Jews when everything went well with them. But when the church came under affliction, they disclaimed it again. Surely there is that same cowardly spirit in the people whom Jesus rebuked. You worship you know not what, John 4:22. You see, Christianity has only a loose hold on them because they have no better hold on it than a blind man's hand. They refuse to wear the gospel shoe, the ignorant Christian. But secondly, the worldly minded also refuse it. These people insist on having the things of this world and professing Christ at the same time. They are a generation who have nothing to prove their Christianity except some outward observances. There's no evidence whatsoever, once you begin to examine them, that they are followers of Christ. Can we assume that these men and women stand ready to suffer for the gospel? Of course not, says Gurnall. They won't even wear Christ's yoke, far less bear his burden. Those who refuse to do for Christ will certainly never die for Christ. They aren't likely to fight to the blood if they aren't willing to lose a little sweat. So we have the ignorant Christian, the worldly minded. Thirdly, we have the scheming professor, and here he means a professor of religion. This person's creed is to save himself, not from sin, but from danger. He studies the times more than the scriptures and plots strategic moves that shape his course, and he orders his profession accordingly. It's like the hedgehog's house, says Gurnall. It's always open to warm the ward side. So you have the scheming professor, and closely allied with him, fourthly, you have the covetous professor. Some people are so full of worldly projects that suffering for Christ is utterly alien to them. You remember what the Egyptians said about Israel? They are entangled in the wilderness. And this is true of many people. They are entangled by the world, and a wilderness has shut them in. They are no more fit to follow Christ into difficulties and suffering than a man with his foot caught in a trap can pursue his journey. They're caught by the things of the world. Our Saviour, speaking of the miseries that would come on Jerusalem, warned, woe to them that are with child and to them that give suck in those days. Obviously, it would be harder for them to escape the impending danger. How much more then the judgment on those who are so full of the world when the day of testing comes? They find it impossible to escape temptation from life-threatening trials. Actually, those people have already made their choice, since their heart is set on the world. They will not be able to leave it for Christ's company. The ignorant Christian who doesn't know Christ, well, he's not going to be ready to follow and suffer. The worldly minded, not going to be ready. The scheming professor whose whole thought is how he can make his life easy, well, obviously not going to be ready. The covetous person who's keen to get as much as possible, well, if it's going to cost, it's out of the question. The fifth category that Gurnall has is the conceited person. Self-confidence is not a good fit for the gospel shoe. The man who holds an extremely high opinion of himself is far from holiness and far from humility. And he gives an example. During Queen Mary's reign, a man vowed that he was so free of his flesh for Christ's sake that he would far see his fat melt in the flames than go back into error. But his flesh, says Gurnall, outlived his commitment, and cowardice eventually made him part with his faith to save his fat. Those who glory in personal valor as they put on the harness will surely put it off in shame. The heart is deceitful above all things, a Jacob that will supplant itself. The person who doesn't know the length of his own foot cannot fit for himself a gospel or a spiritual shoe, cannot fit himself, rather, for a spiritual shoe. So there are 5 who refuse to wear the gospel shoe. Well, having dealt with that, he then moves on to the next section where he gives us an exhortation, an encouragement to put on the shoe of preparation. Now, I think I have enough time to at least begin to work into this section. So we'll do that. Exhortation then to put on the shoe of preparation. Let all those who bear the name of Christ get this shoe of preparation on and keep it on, so as to be ready to follow the call of God's providence, even if it leads into suffering. Let me share with you, he says, 2 reasons why you must be prepared. And the first reason is this: suffering may come suddenly. It may come suddenly. Sometimes soldiers, he says, don't have as much as an hour's warning before they must take to the field. So you also. You might be called to suffer for God before you expect it. He gives the example of Abraham. He had very little time to deal with his heart and persuade it to obey God when he was called to offer up Isaac. Take now, it says in Genesis 22, take now thy son, thine only son, not in a year, not in a month, not even in a week, but now. This command came during the night, and early in the morning he was on his way to the mountain. How could Abraham have handled such a call, such a shock? Had he not already wrestled with his own willingness or unwillingness to endeavor to be obedient to God in all things? You see, God already had his servant's whole heart, and all Abraham was left to do was to obey. You see, sometimes God makes very sudden changes, just like that, in our personal lives. For example, how would you receive a death notice like the one that God gave Moses? He didn't have the gradual preparation of a lingering illness, but he heard the message while he was still, it seems, in perfect health. Get thee up and die in the mountain, Deuteronomy 32:50. Are we and our feet really ready for a journey like that? But God can change the scene of public affairs as quickly as he can change our personal circumstances. It's not just our personal circumstances, as in Abraham and Moses, but the public circumstances, which can change very quickly and in which difficulty and trouble come. Maybe authority smiles on the church right now, but that smile might become a frown at any moment. 9:31 of Acts says that the churches had rest throughout all Judea. It was a good time. It was a blessed time. It didn't last for long. By the time you reach chapter 12 of Acts, you have Herod the king stretching out his hands to vex certain of the church. And in that persecution, James, the brother of John, dies by the sword. Peter's thrown into prison. The entire church was driven into a corner to pray in the night. And those in chapter 9 who are pressed on every side are now threatened by violent death at every turn. Weather, he says, is far more unpredictable in islands than in continents. Ordinarily, we can know what the day will be like for hours at a time. But in islands particularly, there is no way of knowing what the evening will bring. Summer and winter often crowd into the same day. And all this uncertainty, of course, is caused or affected by the sea that surrounds the islands. Saints in heaven, they live, says Gurnall, so to speak, on a continent where they enjoy a blessed uninterrupted peace. The rest that they have today is what they'll have tomorrow and forever. But here on earth, Christ's church, it's as if it's on an island, encompassed about with the world like a churning sea. Now, at times the elements are kind and calm, but often they are relentlessly cruel as God binds up or looses their wrath. Now, Christian, is it not worth it for you to be ready for suffering, since you don't know from one minute to the next if the wind will favor the gospel or try to destroy? At morning, the wind of the public tide might fill the sail of your profession with encouragement. But before night, they may blow a chilling attack in your face. Why should you be ready? Because suffering can come suddenly in our personal lives and in the public sphere. The second reason he gives is this: if you are not prepared to suffer for Christ on earth, you will not wear a crown in heaven. Romans 8. If children, then heirs, heirs of God, joint heirs with Christ. But you keep reading on. If so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. Well, it's very true that not every saint dies at a stake, of course not. But every saint must have a spirit of martyrdom, a heart prepared for suffering. God never intended for Isaac to be sacrificed, to go back to the example we had earlier on. Yet he did mean for Abraham to lay the knife to his son's throat. And so then he would have us put our neck on the block and be, as Paul said of himself, bound in the spirit under a sincere purpose to give ourselves up to God's will. What does Scripture say? Romans 12, present your bodies a living sacrifice. wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Just as the Jews presented a living beast to the priest, so he could do with it what God had commanded, we are to present our bodies before God, both in active and passive obedience. Anyone who refuses to suffer for Christ now is refusing to reign with him later. Another Jewish custom was for a man to remove his shoe as a sign that he was putting off the right of inheritance. You remember it happened in the book of Ruth. Well, Christian, if you pull off your gospel shoe, you're disclaiming your right to heaven's inheritance. Paul wrote that the persecutions which saints endure for the gospel are an evident token of salvation. That's what we saw in our reading there in Philippians 1, verse 28. An evident token of salvation. Surely then, denying Christ in order to escape suffering must be a token of perdition. My dear ones, he concludes, is heaven's glory not worth a few light afflictions? Nabal's vineyard was no spectacular item of real estate. Nabal's vineyard was no spectacular item of real estate, yet he knew its value as the family inheritance under God. Rather than sell it at market value, or even exchange it for a better plot, he chose to forfeit his life by provoking a mighty king. But despite his zeal, Naboth lost his life as well as the acre or two of his father's estate. Now, there is no comparison between his vineyard on earth and Christ's paradise in heaven, which we will not lose and is infinite in value. But we must emulate him in his readiness to suffer. When your enemies unwittingly do you the favor of robbing you of your physical life, they only help you enter into the full possession of your eternal inheritance in heaven. It's quite striking, that last sentence. When your enemies unwittingly do you the favor of robbing you of your physical life, they only help you enter into the full possession of your eternal inheritance in heaven. Well, friends, that brings us neatly to the conclusion of that particular section. And if we're spared next time, we'll come to directions for wearing the gospel shoe. And while we trust the Lord will bless that reading to us.